And it strikes me after more than a year, somehow here in New Zealand, probably our enthusiasm or interest for what is happening in Ukraine following and let's not mess around, Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's kind of dropped off the front page. It's not the sexy story it once was. And despite Ukraine holding out longer than a lot of armchair critics would have expected, things are getting tough there. A counter-offensive appears not to have delivered the sort of gains that many would have hoped for. And the war is, well, I guess, dragging on. I know a number of New Zealanders who have been over there to take part or to give what assistance they can on the Ukrainian side. Some have come back pretty scared about what happened to them. And Ukraine continues through the excellent efforts of Mr. Zelensky to ask for help from countries around the world who believe, I think, in democracy and the rule of law and national sovereignty. New Zealand's helped out. We've trained troops in Britain. We haven't sent the LAVs that were asked for on several occasions, and I cannot for the life of me understand why we did not. But we have in general been supportive of the effort in Ukraine in terms of our government. One individual who I know has done an awful lot of work there, and his latest project has grabbed a few headlines, is former Tauranga Mayor, entrepreneur and businessman Tenby Powell, who's just been involved in delivering ambulances to Ukraine. And he joins us on the line from Ukraine, which is about 10:30 at night right now. Tenby, welcome to the platform. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. You there, Tenby? Hello.
Hello, Sean. How are you?
Good, mate. Where are you talking to us from?
Well, look, I'm not actually in Ukraine. I'm in Amsterdam.
Oh, okay.
As it happens, because we've managed to get the ambulances to Kiev, and Sharon, my wife, who came over to help drive one of the ambulances from Antwerp to Warsaw, is with me, and we've just taken a couple of weeks while she's here to get a breather, and the ambulances are getting serviced in that 2 weeks' time, and I'll be back in Kiev then, and that'll lead us into the delivery phase. So we're just taking a couple of weeks off, actually.
Yeah. So where are the ambulances going to end up? And these were, what, decommissioned or out-of-service ambulances from New Zealand? I think about 7 of them.
Yeah, there were 7. They were decommissioned. They were not fit for purpose in New Zealand, and yet compared to other ambulances I've taken into Ukraine previously, they were in fabulous nick. I mean, it's testimony to St. John's maintenance schedule. I mean, this is pretty boring, but we got 7 ambulances off the ship in Antwerp after 3 months, and 6 of them had a flat battery, and that was it. And these things, and once we cooked them up, we drove them 2,500 kilometres to Kiev, and not one missed a heartbeat.
Wow.
It is just extraordinary.
Do they have gear in them, or is it just the vehicle?
They were absolutely in pristine condition. They had the striker beds in the back, which are those things that just snap out and you throw people on them and then lift them up and snap them back in again.
Yeah.
While they did not have the oxygen bottles because they were illegal to carry on the ship, they did have all the oxygen lines. They got the lights and sirens. Not that you necessarily need that, but they were in absolutely fabulous condition, and the best ambulances that we've taken in by a country mile. And even though one of them had done over 500,000 kilometres, but for a Mercedes Sprinter, of which they all were, that's nothing. I mean, these things can do a million plus kilometres, and they will end up doing that very quickly.
Yeah. Tenby, who do you hand them over to?
We're going to hand them over to a mix of regimental medical units, those which are on the front line and need that asset. They need an organic asset of that sort themselves to be able to do their own withdrawals and evacuations, and probably some red zone hospitals as well. We've got very close relationships with and in Ukraine, it works with a director and the head nurse of a hospital, and we've got very close relationships with a number, and quite a number. And of course, as this would always happen, the bidding is fierce, and not that I use the term bidding in the sense that they desperately want one.
So you try and give them to the most needy where they'll do the most good, I presume.
We do. We want them to be busy, and that's a clumsy way of saying we want them to be well used. Busy, is a term which can mean that they're constantly taking Ukrainian soldiers, wounded soldiers, back to hospitals. Yeah. The reality, though, Sean, is that is the case. We live in an operational environment. These ambulances are going to be repainted, and probably some of them in camouflage colours. Yeah. And they will end up being very busy. But it's better that they have these assets, these organic assets, as part of a regimental medical unit or as part of a red zone hospital where they can use them properly. And they will be, I know that they're going to be absolutely thrilled at the quality that these ambulances will give them. So
is this the end of it, Tenby, or are you going to go and find more ambulances and deliver them into Ukraine?
Yeah, great question. So we're not going to repeat the exercise from New Zealand. It took 3 months. They left New Zealand on the 4th of May. Yeah. And here we are now. And look, it wasn't inexpensive, even though we had... I mean, look, St John were a dream to deal with, as were shipping company Wallinas Wilhelmsen, who shipped these things for free. But I wouldn't want to go back and ask for all that again. So what I have done is I've started a conversation with St John UK to get their ambulances, of which they've got, significantly greater in number.
Right, and it's a shorter journey. A lot easier. Yeah.
Oh, it's, can you imagine from London to Kyiv is very different from Auckland to Kyiv, right? Yeah. So there's not all that water in between. Yeah. So look, we're working hard on that right now, and I'm really hoping that St John UK will come to the party with us. And if we do that, then we can move, tens and tens of them. And I'm hoping we can do that because that's what they need.
Yeah. Tenby, what is the feeling when you got in Ukraine? What is the feeling you're getting from your contacts in Ukraine? And as I said, as a journalist, I look at stories and events, and this has gone off the boil. It's not front page news anymore. And that's just the way public opinion and public interest goes. There is also, from the coverage that I'm reading, this counter-offences hasn't gone as well as it might have, and perhaps there are a few people losing faith in the idea of Ukraine prevailing.
Okay, so two things really. It's a very different Ukraine to what I had in the 6 months I was here last year.
Right.
We were operating under very different conditions and in very different geographies. We're down on Kherson as opposed to being in Kharkiv. And so, Kherson is constantly under fire. And Kherson is further east than Odessa, and as many of your listeners will know, Sean, Odessa has just been absolutely hammered recently. And we're taking aid into all those areas. Odessa, Mykolaiv and Kherson are the key areas in that south and southeastern region. So it's a very different environment. The other thing that I think people need to understand is that a military in defence has the advantage in some respects. And Russia has had the chance to really develop fortified positions. Yeah, they've got tank traps. They've got the mining. The mining is phenomenal, and there are decades. There's decades.
So are we? Is it sort of degenerating into trench warfare? Is what you're saying?
No. It has been trench warfare. It has been warfare like World War I. Since 2022. There's no doubt about that. We haven't seen the likes of it since that. However, I'm not remotely worried. I think the Ukrainians are being very sensible. There's a concept in the military called surfaces and gaps. And if you hit a surface, you withdraw. But if you hit a gap and you can go through it with numbers of a level of force that can actually accommodate what has to happen in there, then you're away. And I think the Ukrainians are being very prudent at how they approach the surfaces and gaps. They're still probing. And they are using the weather to their advantage. And they know that, in time, they're going to have to make a big push, and that is before winter. And my pick is that they will still do that. But the reality is that when Russia does something in the southwest, if you will. Ukrainian operates with a counterpunch in the east, and vice versa. And they're actually making incredible gains, given the we use in the army this concept of force ratio. And the force ratio is well against Ukraine, and yet they are still making significant advantages.
Yeah. Is there a hope, Tenby? Do you get a hope from the Ukrainians that it will be a domestic upheaval inside Russia? And gosh, there was a lot of interest in that weird weekend of a possible coup. That at the end of the day, really, though, this is going to be about Russia just realising it can't win and brokering a peace.
Well, that could be the case. I mean, Prigozhin, I think, has been very clear on his criticism of various Russian generals. But pushing that aside, I mean, the world, I think, still understands, Sean, that this is a war of colonialism masked under a false flag. Purporting to support Russian nationalists in the Donbass. I mean, I have yet to meet a Nazi in Ukraine. And so this whole incredible propaganda machine around the Nazification of Ukraine is something that the world has got to realise just does not exist. And, it was even last year that Putin was saying that, and quoted as saying that, that he doesn't recognise Ukraine as a country, he doesn't recognise the people as Ukrainian, and he doesn't recognise the language as bona fide. And he considers Zelensky as nothing more than a Jewish clan leader, I think he said, and that he views the Ukrainian people as vassals, which is to say that they are, merely holders of land by feudal tenure and paying homage to Mother Russia. So I think the world is beginning to realise that this was absolutely a false flag operation, the so-called, limited military operation. And the Ukrainians have proved that they are incredible soldiers and that they're going to use, I think, expeditiously the Western military equipment that they're given. They're not just going to throw it away, and they're not going to do dumb things. They've got good generals, they've got good tactics, they understand operations, and they're going to use it when they see fit. But my pick is that within the next 1 month or so, we're going to see some real breakthroughs. I may be wrong, I hope I'm not, but that's where I put my money.
Yeah. Tenby, I have to ask you, why have you and Sharon taken such an interest in Ukraine? There are 100 different things you could be doing with your time, expertise, and, to be frank, money. Why Ukraine?
Okay, well, I'm going to be brutally honest with you here. There's three things, and it's the third thing that was key for me anyway. One is I've got a military background, as you know. I sort of get the...
You got to what, Lieutenant Colonel?
A colonel,
colonel,
secondly, I have had some success in business, and I knew it was going to be a mix of military and business that made this work from a humanitarian aid organisational point of view, and it has absolutely been that, from fundraising through to big logistics. But the third thing is that, I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, had a prostatectomy in that last phase of my mayoralty of Tauranga, which is why I resigned. I know there's many reasons as to what people believe I resigned.
There are a lot of stories about that, believe me.
Actually, for that. Tauranga's just booming now, by the way. But anyway, pushing that aside, and it was that when you're diagnosed with stage 4 anything cancer, you say to yourself, well, look, I may as well throw myself out there, because if I don't, and like many people in my position, you live on as I do, on a 6-monthly blood test. And I'm not suggesting that any 6 months later could be, you've got a terminal problem, but it could be that you've got to go back and have more treatment. And so you're locked into a regime of chemo or radio or some such thing where you're sitting around, throwing slippers at the television. And that's kind of not me, Sean. So I just thought, I just find this invasion abhorrent on multiple levels. An illegal invasion, one that could has the potential to change the geopolitical positions of many countries in the world, and indeed that is happening now with Belarus and now Poland and the other three NATO countries of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania now all of a sudden starting to shore up around that border. I think it has the potential to make real geopolitical changes, and frankly, at its worst, and I don't want to be dramatic about it, I don't want my kids or my grandkids having to fight this war ultimately. And so, do I think we're going to move the dial with Kiwi Care? No, I don't. But I think we absolutely move the dial for the people that we touch with humanitarian.
Yeah, you've got to be realistic about the outcomes and how much you can do.
Absolutely. We can't change the world, but we can change the world for a few people who we meet.
Are you getting the support, or if you like, the lack of opposition and red tape from the New Zealand government that you need? Have they been supportive of all the work you've done?
Sean, just checking. Can you still hear me? There was
no, I've got you. I've got you loud and clear.
Okay?
Yeah, no, all good.
Well, look, I haven't asked for government support, and I certainly don't get it.
Yeah.
We have had the most extraordinary support from New Zealanders in terms of our fundraising on the Give a Little page under Kiwi Care. I wouldn't ask for government support because, the reality is that, and I'm picking my words, I'm not sure why I'm picking them because, the government has supported the big aid agencies, of which, there's an awful lot of the funding in the big aid agencies that goes into salaries and apartments and all that sort of stuff. So we don't pay our people anything. We're all volunteers, literally. So we don't have a salary, and some of the hovels we lived in. And look, rightly so. I hasten to add, rightly so in the sense that it's the right thing to do. Also, it's the right thing to do from a security point of view. I mean, if you end up living in 5-star hotels, as some of the organisations do, you do become a target. And I've often said to the Kiwi Care teams at the time, we will live in these humble abodes because no one cares. No one will find us here. But you did mention something in your intro that I do want to pick up on, which is the labs. We need the labs here. When I say we, I mean Ukraine. And having knowledge of the labs from my military background, I was commissioner of the Armoured Corps. I don't believe they're fit.
I can remember asking Penny Henare a year ago because I knew they'd been asked for, and the government really fudged whether or not it had been asked for them. And then their excuse as to why they weren't sending them just did not stack up.
Okay, so they've been asked twice. Ardern's been asked and Little's been asked. And they both declined, which is really sad because the issue is fundamentally the cost to get them there. And without making a finer point of this, I've been talking with officials in the Ukrainian government about what we could do. And the bottom line is this, is if we could get them for free, we would transport them. We'd find a way of getting them there. So
there would be no cost for transport on the New Zealand taxpayer?
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Now, I just need to go back to one point, though, and this has been taught, this is something which is really important. My advice to the Ukrainian government has been that I don't believe these vehicles are fit for purpose as either recon vehicles or armoured personnel carriers.
Right.
They will do with them as they please, and it's over to them. Others may disagree with me. In an open country environment, the likes of which we have never operated in, and never experienced in quite this way before. They are desperately exposed vehicles that will not withstand.
My understanding was the Ukrainians wanted them for behind the front line logistics and moving people around because they offered at least some level of support.
So what we've suggested to them is that they are used for armoured ambulances. And so you strip the guns off if you need to.
Yeah.
You strip the smoke generators off, you slap a red cross on the side, and all of a sudden you've got a great capability, a seriously good capability as an armoured ambulance.
For getting people off the front line.
And they would be absolutely fantastic in that role. Now, the ambulances that we've brought in, if they get hit by anything, including heavy machine gun, they're toast. Whereas the labs do provide a high level of protection.
And let's be frank, we have no use for them here.
We have no use for them. Absolutely not. No. Well, look, there's 22 of them, as I understand, or 23.
Yeah.
There's many variants which are now which Ukraine have, by the way, and the Australians.
Well, the argument we were getting was the Ukrainians wouldn't be able to get them working again or do the maintenance, and the Ukrainians came back and said, no, we can. That's BS.
Okay, so let me be very clear about this. Our vehicles, and I'm talking about Kiwi Care vehicles now, have been absolutely trashed in the year. They have been put back together, including plastic welding, engines, complete rebuilding of brake parts. The Ukrainians are the most incredibly innovative and resourceful people. They are great engineers. They are great technicians. There is nothing they can't do. Absolutely nothing.
Tenby, do you have a line for Kiwi Care between military aid and, if you like, civilian or humanitarian aid, or are you not concerned about those distinctions?
Kiwi Care is all around civilian aid. The ambulances, because of the nature of that particular capability, will end up, in some cases, at military medical units. But Kiwi Care is focused solely on aid to hospitals and aid to civilians. So I'll give you a quick example. In Kherson, we have a 12-ton truck that we bought thanks to the wonderful people, Sir Graham Henry and Paul Dykesall and Brent Impey, who you'll know, who formed this thing called Waiheke Trucking for Ukraine. And these are, by the way, these three gentlemen and my wife are now trustees of Kiwi Care, which is a registered New Zealand charitable trust. But they raised $73,000 for a truck. We bought that truck, a 12-ton truck, and we now run it backwards and forwards, and mostly down to Kherson from Kiev. But on the outskirts of Kherson, which is to say to the west of Kherson, there are villages and displaced people who are desperate, in absolute desperate need still. And we've marked these positions of these villages and what have you, and we go back there regularly to take, you can imagine it, Sean, everything from food and water to toothpaste and tampons.
Tenby, we've run way over time because it has been a really, really fascinating conversation. I thank you so much for your time. And could I also say, if you've got campaigns you're running, you want to get the word out anywhere, the platform is more than happy to help in any way we can. So I would ask you, by talking to our people in our audience, so I'd ask that you stay in touch. That has been a really, really interesting insight into what is going on.
Thank you, mate.
And I commend your work to everyone. Do take care.
Thank you, Sean. Really appreciate the time.
Cheers, bud. That is Tenby Powell, businessman, former army officer, got to the rank of colonel, entrepreneur, former mayor of Tauranga, cancer sufferer, I suppose, cancer victim, cancer carrier. What a fascinating story and insight. And I see a few people saying, they're all Nazis. The Azov battalion are all Nazis. Look, I kind of tend to put stock in someone who's been involved in that conflict since its beginning or since very soon after its beginning and has had numerous trips there. I quite like someone who's been on the ground and knows what he's talking about. Hugh says that Tenby is doing a great job. Yeah, really interesting.